So I feel you need to identify those, I guess, what we call it as pockets of brilliance in each team to go who has that desire and the skill. That's where I think the importance of those people leaders comes in to go, how do you identify those right people?
Welcome to Process Pioneers, the show that takes a deep dive into the minds of decision makers, key influencers, and process experts who are pioneering the world of everything process.
Welcome to another episode of Process Pioneers. My name is Daniel Rayner. I'm the host of Process Pioneers, and I love these conversations that I get to have with different BPM practitioners and performers and BPM specialists, looking at how BPM can deliver value to an organization. And it's such a multifaceted topic. There are many areas you can explore, and I think one of the fun things or the great things about this conversation is really tailoring it to the interviewees. So what are their experiences? What do they find fascinating about the BPM space at the moment? What challenges are they encountering and how are they overcoming those challenges? And today is another first for Process Pioneers, where we've actually have a previous guest on for their second interview, second conversation. And we've got Ant Raj joining us. He's a process design lead at the NRMA. Now, Ant was actually our first interview when we started this whole podcast series. So it's an absolute pleasure to have you back on the show, Ant.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, it probably feels like life's come a full circle since our first interview. So it's good to be back, and I hope can add some more value than last time, and it's not the same thing people hearing again and again. So yeah, fingers crossed.
That's great. And I think when we spoke last, it would have been not too long after COVID kind of hit the world, and so we were kind of dealing with that at that stage. But I think we've obviously got a number of topics that I'd love to touch on in our conversation, and one of them being what has the last 12 months looked like. Obviously, you've had your own strategy and ambitions and goals for process management at the NRMA, but also looking at how COVID has kind of made everything a little bit more turbulent, and we've had to, I guess, really adapt as organizations. But before we get into that, I know you've set up this team or this group internally called the League of Extraordinary Process Champions. Where did that come from? And talk to us a little bit about this group.
Right. Yeah, that's been an interesting journey in itself. But I think it was where it came from also was probably like just getting people to be involved and, belong to something while with all this COVID thing was happening. So again, like I said, how we like to make process sexy again. And I like your t-shirt, by the way. Well done. Thank you. Good plug-in. No, so I think when COVID hit and there was a lot of focus on, how do we continue to be effective and efficient in the way we do things while we are working from home and adjusting to that. And work kind of picked up, and there's a lot of different teams reaching out for help. And given that I was the only process design lead, I thought of looking at it as a process improvement problem to go, how do we solve this problem forward? There's a lot of work coming and there's only myself doing it. How do we come up with a solution which is helping everybody involved and it's also sustainable? So we can embed it into the business. And that's where the idea with my manager, when I spoke to him, we came up with this model where we go, okay, what we do is if there is a process improvement piece that is at a level 1, level 2, or a level 3, if you look at the process modeling hierarchy, I get directly involved and I become the process improvement, lead on that. Mm-hmm. And if it was a level 4, level 5, or into that work SOP level, like a standard operating procedure level process, that's where we said, okay, what we'll do is that the business unit who's asked for help, we get them to nominate a subject matter expert who then becomes our process champion, who I coach and mentor on some basic process improvement skills. So that's probably on need to need basis. So they don't have to go through DMAIC, they don't need to learn Six Sigma, or they don't go through a course, but we literally go, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? What tool from the toolkit can help you solve the problem? So we just coach you on that and you go and do it yourself. So what it does is for the people leaders, it gives them the opportunity to give their teams that development opportunity without having to actually promote them, because it's just a new tool you learn. And like, that a lot of it you can learn on your day job. So it's not something that you need to be removed from your day job to learn and then you come back to it. So, and it basically, I guess, streamlines the change management aspect of it, because the team who has the issue is owning the problem, the solution experience, and they identify the problem, they identify the root cause, and they figure out what can be done, and they implement it themselves. So all of it is done by the team itself. So they own the whole continuous improvement journey, and they get to learn something new. And that's actually worked really well for us. We've got a lot of interest from different business units. We've, I think, now got 9 or 10 odd process champions. And like I said, it has to sound sexy. So it is coming from the whole League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. So we said we are the League of Extraordinary Process Champions. So it's something you would like to be a part of. It's like the Avengers. I'm like, oh, Spider-Man was not in the Avengers until this movie. And then he comes in. So it was just that, yes, so now I'm part of the Avengers. And what we've also done is, it's again not just something that we basically teach them and they just go and do stuff, but what we want to do is we want to create a community, and we want others to know that there are others who are going through that same experience. So you're not just doing it by yourself here in your business unit. So we do like monthly or every 4 to 5 weeks, we do what we call it as the League of Extraordinary Process Champion Roundtable, where we bring all these champions back into a forum where we highlight one project and we spotlight one project where one process champion showcases what they've done. But what we get them to focus more on is what they've actually learned from that experience, because that is what we want people to know of, and we want people to share. And we do get industry externals and other people from different parts of the various other industries, and a lot of my ex-colleagues who helped me with that, they've been very kind enough to jump in, and they've shared their thoughts and experiences and what they have done in the process improvement space. So you get to learn from other people and not just from people within an RMA. And it's been going really well as well. We get at least 40-50 people attending every month. Hopefully we can have you sometime featured there as well. And yeah, but it's going really well.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think that's incredible that you've been able to bring 40-50 people together, subject matter experts, to, I guess, discuss challenges and obstacles and learnings and takeaways. It certainly would play a big part in building momentum and getting that collaboration between the different departments and different teams and projects. What has that meant for the organization as a whole, to have so many people that are collaborating and talking about sharing ideas about how we can manage and improve our business processes? How can we manage and improve the way we do things, the way we support our customers, the way that we're delivering value? Because ultimately, everything we're doing, it's tied back to some sequence of tasks or sequence of activities. So what has that done for the organization? Or maybe it's early days, but what are you noticing? I guess, what's the value that's coming from that?
I guess the most important thing is that people are showing interest and they want to be a part of it. So they're trying to see like what's going on. So there's questions of who's coming on next and what are you presenting next? Because we also touch on like one tool or one skill set every session. So it's like, so you're doing a process improvement masterclass next time, or a process mapping masterclass next time. I would want to attend that because I'm doing something and that might help me with that. So it's about creating that awareness and interest, and people are, I think, dialing in to just hear. And I think most importantly, it's learning what others are doing and trying to, it becomes a bit less overwhelming. So you know that, someone else is actually going through that same journey and they've also probably learned something. So it's not like, Ant's too busy or something. So you've got these other champions you can reach out to who will probably relate to you more because they've also just been through that journey. So it's again giving them that level of comfort to reach out to these other champions who can actually help you and support you. And wherever I need to be, involved, I can just step in. If I don't need to be involved, it's actually better that they do their own improvement initiatives in their own units. So that's, I think, where we're getting to is people are confident and people are engaged and they're keen to look for opportunities for improvement. So I've had examples where one champion's done one thing, but now because they're kind of hooked to this, and it is a bit addictive, to be honest, because I've been doing it for 14 years. So now I know it is addictive. They've also actually started looking out for their own opportunities. So I think that certain people doing few more other things that I don't even hear of, which is good.
Yes.
Because that's the whole point of it, I guess, making them, I guess, self-sufficient, and they're confident enough to do their own improvements, so they know what they're doing. And wherever they need help, I'm obviously available to have a chat and kind of give them some guidance. But it's that ways, I think it's worked really well. So it's given them something to look forward to, something to learn, and something to be involved with.
That's amazing. That's great. And for someone that's listening to our conversation and maybe they're in an organization, maybe they are where you were 18 months, 2 years ago, and maybe they're in an organization where there isn't a lot of support or emphasis on process management. I think this is a fantastic idea. Where should someone start if they want to set up their own team of process champions internally, especially when you're at an early stage, when you're not going to start with 50 people, you're probably going to start with 2 or 3 people. But how can people set up their own league of extraordinary process champions?
Interesting question. I guess it does need an anchoring point to some extent, that someone who starts coordinating all these activities. So like if I look at myself, I'm not really doing a lot of it. I'm just coordinating and making sure I connect people to the right people. So I've just been doing that sort of an exercise, but I guess it will have to start from someone taking that initiative and putting the hand up to go, let me try setting this up. And then identifying those champions, like those subject matter experts who have the need and the desire to actually do some improvements. And to be honest, it will always come from the teams themselves. Like it's something I feel that they'll probably be more passionate about because they're doing it day in and day out. So if it's an improvement initiative that helps them directly, they'll just be automatically involved and hooked onto it. So I feel you need to identify those, I guess, what we call it as pockets of brilliance in each team to go who has that desire and the skill. That's where I think the importance of those people leaders comes in to go, how do you identify those right people who, if given that platform and the opportunity and that development opportunity, they'll actually, they'll showcase themselves and they'll probably, come out of their shell and they'll be able to present that they can do a lot more. And there are a lot of people in our team, in our different business units that I've seen, they've actually raised their hand up to go, I want to do this. And I've always wanted to do this. And like I said, the other areas that it helps in is it's not just about doing stuff, but then how do you then come back and present it to a wider audience? So it also helps you kind of develop your presentation skills. You kind of go, how do you present your ideas in a concise manner? Like a lot of the process improvement piece is about that communication and how do you communicate what you're doing to different teams. So it helps you with that as well. Like you can actually add it to your development plan. So it can also eventually, when it's a bit more, I guess, structured, I don't see why it can't be a part of your development model or your performance, how you measure performance. So you can build it into that kind of framework, whatever you have in your organizations around that. So you can embed that into your programs around your development plans, your coaching plan, and stuff like that. So I think that's one way to go about it. But yeah, you need that anchoring point or someone who takes ownership of that, whichever team it sits in. Like I'm not really I'm not precious that it has to come from people of culture or from technology or finance. You just need that one person to just kickstart the whole thing.
Yes, yeah. And I love that the focus on this group is removing any bottlenecks, empowering as many people as possible. As you're saying, if you don't need to be involved, then that's a win. That's fantastic. Yeah. If you've got people out there that are these process champions that are feel empowered and are really owning it, owning this space. I think that's amazing and something that our listeners can sort of take away with is well, you simply can't do it by yourself. I mean, there does need to be that person, that initial person that needs to spark the movement or get things rolling. But be aware that you don't want to be a bottleneck. You don't want to be the person that you're the only one that's solving any problems, and so you're just going to your plate of problems is just going to continue to grow. You don't want to find yourself in that position. You want to empower people so that you can start delegating. People can be solving problems in their own areas, and you're in a position of more supporting these people, supporting these process champions. I think that's a fantastic way about it.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, I've been obsessed with Hamilton for the last few, couple of years now. And it's like there's that line in one of the songs, my favorite song, which says, "It's not the moment, it's the movement." So it's going how we get people involved. It's not just that you do it at one instant of time and you just move on from it and then everybody forgets about it, but how is it sustainable? And this is the most sustainable way of doing process improvement, is how you embed it as a part of the culture and DNA, rather than having I'm not a huge fan of that whole center of excellence terminology or approach where there is this team that you lean on to every time you need help.
Right.
But it should be you just help yourselves. So they come in, they embed those learnings and those coaching and those mindsets, and they then eventually move on. So I think that's what it is all about. So you just create that moment rather than it's just being a moment of, oh, we hit COVID, we need to do something. And then once we've done with it, we just move on.
Yes, yeah, that's great. And you mentioned something earlier about process hierarchy, and say you would be focusing on level 1, 2, 3. You'd have other process champions focusing on more of the granular detail, subject matter experts. How important is having a process hierarchy? Because it may sound like a silly question to some people, but I don't think any question is a silly question. And there are some organizations out there that are, documenting processes, but there isn't any sort of real hierarchy or structure to it. So what does a process hierarchy do to your processes? How does it help you manage them? Why is it important?
Interesting, because I think this brings us back to our first conversation where we're talking about how you create that CV for a business unit. I think that's what it reinforces that whole importance. That's what it does, because we've just again kicked off our whole knowledge management piece again, and I've been talking to a few more teams because we've added them in our scope. And when I speak to them about, so can you tell me about all the processes that you guys execute? They're like, all of them? Like, but that's a huge list. But I'm like, yeah, but how do you guys kind of start? And they're like, oh, here's this list of processes. And they'll give me like a list of 120 odd processes. Nothing wrong with that. And I say, well, I'm a new starter. I've joined in. Where do I start? Like, how does it flow? Like, I don't see the link. So what I tell them is what it might help is if you look at your end customer and how would they interact with all these processes in what sequence,
right? And
then go from those list of processes that you just given me, say 120, how many involve me as a customer directly and how many do not. That's how you can start building that model. So for example, if I look at like a car rental business, right? You can have a whole set of processes, but if I look at how does your end customer interact with a car rental company? So I first call and find out about, is there a car available for my date? So that's that initial query handling. So that's your first bucket of processes. While the member facing part is when they actually reach out or they call or they go to your website to find out availability. But the backend processes for those is how do you manage your fleet and how do you make sure something's been returned and is ready to use and it's cleaned on the day that this member is asking the dates for. So you kind of start going, now this is your flow from inquiring to then actually booking to then actually I can make changes between booking and from the day of pickup, I can go, I don't need a small car, and now I need an SUV. So how do you manage that? Again, how does your fleet management processes, which are not customer facing, help you understand how do you fulfill those requirements? Then you come to the day of pickup, and then they drive out and they might have issues with the car while they're out, and then to the point they return. So then you start framing your process hierarchy accordingly, where you start with customer queries, different buckets, and then what you do in the backend, and then you start shaping them up. So now when you look at process improvements, you can look at how do I ensure I have the right car at the right time available for the member when they've asked for a availability? So you then start looking at those processes that impact that customer experience directly. So that's how you start shaping things up. So I go, maybe the one way to start is, it may not fit everyone, to go, who are the end customers you are basically delivering to? So like start from their view and start with that customer journey, and then start laying down your processes, and that gives you a bit of a hierarchy to begin with.
Yes, right.
So that's an approach you can take. And if you're purely internal, very operational, then you can start looking at your team members to go, which ones do you do and which ones do I do? Oh, are they different? So hang on, you list out yours under your name, I start listing it out under my name. Those names can eventually become functions, or it can become you do admin stuff. Actually, I do all the other finance stuff, and somebody else also does all these form handling stuff. So we can start looking at these categorizations.
Yes.
So that's where I think they can start with. But yes, having a list of just 120, 150 is actually a pretty good start. Then what you've got is, you've got 150 things, you just need to put them into those buckets.
Yes, right. And I guess having that cross-functional view where you can see how all of those processes link together. When one process starts and ends, where is it going to next, and what's happening before that process? And that's a great example, looking at the customer experience, the customer journey compared to the back end process, and then also being aware of, well, if a change is made on this side, how does that affect on the other side? How does it affect the upstream or downstream impact? Because you might be wanting to make the most incredible sort of customer experience, but do you have the resources set up for that, or is that going to just cause more problems later down the track?
Yeah, and it's like, what we say is, I personally feel that it's the employee experience that drives the customer experience. So you can design the best customer experience possible, but if your teams are not empowered, or they don't have the right, I guess, tools or the information at their disposal to actually deliver to that customer experience, then it's going to fall off somewhere. So you need to empower teams at the same time while you're designing the best possible customer experience.
That's great. And looking, I guess, towards the future or the present, because like talking about technology and how much has been is talked about at the moment. We've got artificial intelligence, we've got machine learning. When it comes to process, that we've got very specific topics like robotic process automation and process mining and different technologies like that. Talk to us about, I guess, these technologies, and when should an organization start considering it? Because we hear plenty of stories where an organization has dived into something and they're not actually set up for it, or they don't have the fundamentals in place, in which case it either falls flat or they don't get as like maximum value from it.
That's an interesting question, because we were at a roundtable the other day and we were discussing it. And what I feel, especially for our, I guess, organization and the area that we play in terms of emergency breakdown assistance, when you're on the side of the road and we probably have kids in the car and it's 12 in the night, I would personally actually want to speak to a person. Don't give me a chatbot, or don't give me an AI solution that I'm kind of interacting with, but I would actually be more, I guess, comforted if I'm speaking to a human who's trying to help me out. So I think for us, it's about identifying the moments that matter, like we call it, to go where that human interaction is absolutely critical and it cannot be replaced for whatever reason. Well, that doesn't mean that we can't look at AI or robotic process automation and stuff, because the way I see it in our space is we can actually use it internally. So we can actually see if any of our operational processes that deliver those key customer experience points or moments that matter to go, we can use them in those spaces. So we can have them more like inward facing, if that makes sense, to go help our frontline to do something faster, so that we can deliver that key moment that matters to our end customer or the end member who's broken down at the side of the road. So they are speaking to a human, but the human is assisted by all these AI chatbot functionalities that help them do their job faster, so that we can get someone out there to our customer or member faster while they're broken down at the side of the road in the midnight with kids in the car. So for us, it's that delicate balance of where do not want to go too much into the AI and robotic space. We want to keep that human connection going. So
Yes.
yeah, so that's, I think for us, it's an interest. But like I said, we can use all of that internally. So we can have inward facing, I guess, chatbots or AI solutions that help our frontline deliver those experiences faster and in a more efficient manner. And yeah, they're making that big difference to our members.
Yes, definitely. And I guess that's how an organization will remain at the front of their market, or pioneering their market, is by looking at their processes, and both from that customer experience side, but the back end processes that support that customer experience. It also plays into delivering that better experience. And I think, whether it's a large organization that are looking to remain a few steps ahead of the pack, or whether it's a new player to the block, and they're trying to disrupt an entire industry, it all starts with process. It all starts with, how are we going to take our customers, our stakeholders on this journey in the most enjoyable, most efficient, most effective way, so that customers would prefer to choose our services as opposed to someone else.
Yeah, and it's like understanding what we do and how we do it, and then how do we deliver it, so that again it gives you that cut through from the rest. And how does it differentiate you from someone else who's doing the exact same thing, probably?
Yes, right. And how do you know that when you are coming up with innovative ideas of how to deliver value or an experience to the end customer, how do you, walk that line of, touching on the whole technology versus human interaction that we're talking about? How do you walk that line where, a chat bot or something like that may be able to deliver information faster, so maybe it's more efficient, but it's lacking that human element where the customers don't feel it's as trustworthy? I guess, you can see that in other industries as well, like with our home internet providers, being able to talk to a chatbot online to solve a problem, as opposed to being able to call a real person up and talk to them over the phone. One might be more efficient, but one might be more effective. How do you walk that line, especially when you haven't, brought that idea to market yet, and you're not sure actually how is that going to play out in reality? Are there any things that we haven't assumed?
Yeah, I think the one key thing to remember, even especially for us as process improvement people, are that we're also customers.
Right.
So what we are sometimes so focused on, like the problem we have at hand for us to solve and stuff, we keep forgetting that we are also end customers for certain various service providers. So it's about walking in the shoes of, how they say that you walk the Gamba. So you walk the experience yourself to understand, as a customer yourself, what is that experience you would want to have for that particular industry type or for that particular interaction. Like, if I just need to update my address on any of my services, or I've just got a new credit card or a debit card, I need to change details, I know I don't need to speak to someone to do it. Give me that much faster digital chatbot based experience where I go update my details and I kind of move on with it. But where I've got something more tricky, or I need to make, understand certain things, and I need to actually speak to someone, or I feel I'll actually be more comfortable talking to someone. And then I go, okay, so hang on, at my work, where are these processes that I'm looking at? What would I want to do if I was the end customer? So sometimes I guess it's just that we forget that we are end customers as well for various other industries and various other products and services. So we need to remind ourselves that, wait, hang on, if I was the customer in this situation, what is that experience that I would want to benefit from? Yes. And that's what I do is, when we are also doing any kind of process improvement or a product or a proposition design, I tend to bring in other people from our company, like from our business unit, or just from within NRMA, to come in to do a bit of a customer experience journey exercise, where I go, if you were the customer, how would you want this to be played out as? So, and then you learn from that, because again, your colleagues are also consumers and customers as well. So you need to tap into those resources And then again, you also have all these various mechanisms where you can capture the voice of customer through your surveys or through your, the customer insights that how you capture. So those are your key, I guess, information points to look at. But I said, don't forget that you are also a consumer at the end of the day.
Yes.
And how you would want that interaction to play out is probably what you would want to deliver to other people as well.
Yes. Yeah. That's a great point. That's really good.
Yeah.
And one of the topic that I know that you're quite passionate about at the moment is mental health. And I think it's something that we haven't really spoken on this series at all. It's a topic that hasn't come up. It hasn't crossed my mind, if I'm honest. But I found it quite interesting. We obviously had a quick chat before we got started in this conversation today, or the interview. And you're talking about how mental health can play a part and affect the performance of the way processes are executed on or delivered on. So talk to us about, let's flesh this topic out around mental health and process, and why is it something that we need to be aware of and consider as part of our process management approach?
Like I said, mental health is probably one of my most favorite topics that I can speak on. And I mean, I could probably do another whole series on it. But I think what I'd learned, and I think I'd gone to this seminar ages ago at UTS, and where what they talked about was that process is basically a series of steps, right? From you get your inputs, you start doing step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and then you produce your outputs. Especially for those processes where there are humans involved in actually executing those processes, what they talked about was that the how that person who's involved in that process is feeling on the day when they're executing that process actually has a pretty big impact on the output of the process. So unless it's a fully automated process, you've got humans at different stages. You could have the same I guess banking person on the side of the on the other side of the counter. The day they're not feeling their best, the day they've got something going on in their head, there's something bothering them, the fact that they've gone in and they might go, or they're potentially someone, whatever that may be, they might actually go through less interaction through the day. They might take longer to do the same kind of things. And that really stayed with me. And I said, it's a very good, I guess, correlation to go how the humans involved in that process are feeling and thinking, and what is their well-being state like, that actually impacts the output of the process. So what I tend to do, especially in my discovery phase now, when I'm talking to, my with the various stakeholders, I also try to think of a moment when something did not go well in that process, and how did it make you feel? And were you anxious? Were you really stressed? Or were you really unsure of how do I deal with this? How do I handle this? Like, what was going on in your mind at that stage when something did not go well? Or on the flip side, when that process worked really well, what were you thinking? How were you feeling? How did that make you feel? And that, I guess, gives you that really critical insight, because a process is just like a series of steps. You can figure out your inputs and outputs, but understanding the human psyche behind it, I guess, is really critical. And you club it with all the stuff around COVID and people trying to work from home and getting used to this limited social interaction, feeling locked in their houses, and a bit claustrophobic for myself as well. Like, I feel really claustrophobic because I can't go and see and meet other people. I thought it is actually, it's brought that whole importance of mental health and well-being to the forefront. So I'm not sure if you, Joe, check my LinkedIn socials. I've been talking a fair bit about how, and because I guess the first key thing for me is, like, if I break it down into a process of how you look after your mental well-being, again, it is a series of steps that you follow. So you start with the fact that you acknowledge the fact that there is something you need help with.
Right.
And then how do you then find out resources? So do your discovery on who can help me with this? What am I feeling? I do a bit of research. Then you go, okay, so these are the resources, or these are the people who can best help me. Then you then reach out to them. That's the third step. And then the fourth step is how you communicate and start talking about it and kind of give yourself that reinforcement that, yes, it's an ongoing issue I need help with and I need assistance with. And then you basically, then like I do is I then share it with others to go, whoever can actually, benefit from that insight. So you do that in process, you do a best practice, you've done a process improvement piece here, you share it with others to go, hey, I did this, it really worked well for me. Do you want to try it? It tells people, or there are other people having the same issues. and they're dealing with the same problems. Could be a process improvement problem or could be like a mental health problem. Like I said,
Right.
I work on my anxiety disorder and ADHD as well. So for me, the ADHD now, it helps me because from where it was about not being able to focus on a task and, just really losing interest pretty quickly. Now I've got myself a wide variety of things I get involved with, which keeps me active, which keeps me going in terms of I switch from one task to another so that it keeps the interest going.
Yeah.
And when I tell someone else about it, they're like, oh, okay, I also feel something like that. Maybe I should probably go check in with someone. I'm like, yeah, maybe you should. So like I said, it's just that you learn, you do a process improvement piece here, it helps you, and then you share it with the community. It's the
Yes.
exact same thing. It is that process of looking after your mental well-being.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting. That's great.
Yeah. So
And I think there's we do spend a lot of time looking at the customer and what's the customer experience, how are they, what are their emotions throughout the process of dealing with our organization. But I think it's a very valid and important point where we need to understand, well, how are our frontline employees, how are they feeling when they're going through a process? What happens if they have had an off day, or they've just had something terrible happen over the weekend? Not drastic, that means they take the week off work, but they're coming in to do their work, and there could be a lot going on inside their minds. So how do we manage that? How do we, I guess, maybe put risks, identify risks and have controls in place? But also, how do we work with them as people to understand what are they going through and what do they need from us to be able to make it through this day and this week and this month?
Yeah, and it's like I said, again, that human element of it. So again, remembering that human connection and the human element of it, they're going, it is a human actually, executing your process. So let's not forget that human element, because they've got a mind, they've got feelings and thoughts and emotions that can really impact that. So like I said, when I say you've broken down at the side of the road at midnight with kids in the car, how are you feeling and what would actually comfort you? Will a chatbot really comfort you at that stage? Or like a reassuring voice of someone who said, I'm here to help, don't worry, we'll just make sure someone reaches out to you faster.
Definitely.
It's not saying that the chatbots are not bad, but I'm just saying what would help you drive that experience, and how it helps someone's psyche at that stage. You need to understand that, and you just go ahead with that.
Yes, yeah, that's right. And you mentioned just before about COVID and how obviously with COVID and the lockdowns and people having to work from their homes, that's obviously been a big instigator of, I guess, this topic of mental health, because, we're no longer working in large office buildings alongside our colleagues, having that close connection with them, having those lunchtime conversations and those chats over the bubbler. But talk to us about the last 12, 18 months of COVID. It's obviously made things very turbulent. How has process management played a part in the last 12, 18 months? Has it been something that's been brought to the forefront? Has it been something that you've experienced been pushed to the side? Or how has BPM played a part?
I think that's a good question. And this is something we were discussing at our league roundtable. I think it's the last one that we had. I guess what it has done is, even from a human perspective and from a process perspective, it's actually given us the time to step back and see what really adds value to either what I am doing or for the customer that I'm kind of serving to. So it's just like people have actually taken a step back to go, hang on, of all the things that I'm doing, what actually adds that value? And as you know, for lean and for process improvement, that is the most critical element that you look at is what is adding value to your end customer? So I think it has given people that time to take that step back and really understand what is really adding value. Are we being busy just for the sake of being busy and being distracted so that we are not thinking about all these disruptions that are going on? Or we are actually truly doing something that delivers value and is making a difference? So it's given businesses that time to think through that. And the other importance, I think that other thing that has happened, which I guess I'm grateful for, is that, again, that people are reaching out to people, not just for work or for work related interactions, but it's like you go into a meeting and always begins with, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Is there anything that's kind of distracting you today, so that we are aware of it? And I remember Carl, one of my colleagues who was in the previous league session, he was talking about how his teams have stopped apologizing on Teams calls or Zoom calls. They're like, because everybody understands that everybody is struggling with either, is it homeschooling or, pets running around like crazy, minds sleeping at this stage. But there are things that are going outside of your work life or outside of your laptop that does impact you on the day. So it's okay for something to be bothering you, so you don't really have to apologize. And what they say is, we just get on with the things that are important and add value. And you apologizing for something that's affecting everybody in some way, shape or form, it's fine. It's okay. You are human after all. So we just move on and we focus at the real key tasks that we have at hand. And that's again really something that stayed back with me to go, okay, so again, it's about thinking what is adding value to this conversation that we are having now. Is move on to, let's discuss the problem we have at hand and how do we solve it, rather than you apologizing for your kid having to get this schoolwork done and you're just busy with them for the first 5 minutes, which is totally fine. It makes us human after all. So I think the whole idea of the fact that it's all humans after all involved in these processes, and what is adding real value to your organizations, that has come to the forefront. And I think we've done it pretty well as well here, is going really look at those moments that matter and that add value to our employees and our customers that we need to focus on. That's become a key focus, and that's, I think, what's kept us going, I guess, through this whole pandemic.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And for those that are listening to this conversation, that, I think we've touched on a few topics here that are very interesting, and we've been able to do a little bit more of a deeper dive into fewer topics, which I think's been great. I think the League of Extraordinary Process Champions, to be honest, I haven't seen someone rally process champions in a workplace environment as well as you're doing here. And so I think there's a lot to glean from what you're doing there. And also understanding how mental health can play a part in the process. I don't think that's probably being talked about enough. So I think those are some great topics there. But for our listeners that have been listening to this conversation, if they do want to reach out and I guess understand further, well, we're considering setting up our own League of Extraordinary Process Champions or something similar. How do we go about that? What are your top tips? Or even talking about the mental health side of things, how do people connect with you? Ask you questions, find out more about, the various information that you're putting out there. How would you like people to reach out to you?
Oh, easy, I guess. It's just like I'm on LinkedIn, and you've seen I'm fairly active when I have the time. So people are more than welcome to kind of connect with me on LinkedIn, send through your questions or whatever initial, ideas you need help with. More than happy to have a chat. Like I said, I'm pretty social anyways, and with the lockdown and stuff, the more humans I can interact with, whatever medium that is, that's well and good. And like I said, they'll probably get the link to my profile when this comes up. They can always reach out to me. They can ask questions in your comments, or I said they can come through to me through you as well if they need to know anything. And like I said, I'm not sure how much of help it is. I sometimes get that whole imposter syndrome kicks in to go, I'm just fairly new here. I'm still, I guess, figuring my way through this whole process improvement landscape. But if it's something that really resonates with someone and they might need help with, like I said, even with the mental health stuff, it's more like, I guess, if you want to understand where you are and how you're doing before you start helping out others. So that's also like a key thing. So like I said, just reach out, send me a message, drop me an inbox. I'll be more than happy to help.
That's amazing. And if you've really enjoyed listening to my conversation with Ant today, then I'd encourage you to go back and listen to our previous conversation, Making Process Sexy Again. This is, we ended up with, Ant ended up making these shirts, Making Process Sexy Again. So I got the privilege of having one sent over. But yeah, we had another conversation. That was actually the first episode of this Process Pioneers series. There's a lot of value packed into that episode, as there was with this episode. So Ant, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time again to sit down with me and for sharing your experiences and your story around the topic of BPM.
No problems. Thanks for having me. Like I said, the first conversation made this kind of viral. So again, it was good to be back. And I hope, like I said, it adds some value and someone might see something really useful from this conversation. So yeah, thanks for having me, Daniel.